Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. On this episode, we are going to discuss sick and tired of being sick and tired. We've probably all heard that phrase at this point, but we're going to dive into what that actually means and what it looks like if it's playing out in your life. Please do not miss a second of this important episode as we provide tips to get out of the rut and tips to stay well. Ron, how's it going?
It's going great. Business is good. Things are well. But I got to tell you something, Kristin, and I've never said this before. For me, I'm going to be vulnerable on this. This is the most important podcast that we've done, and this is number 61. So I'm looking forward to delving into this. I'm also dreading it just a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
I've mentioned my struggle with sleep, and then I had some circumstances at a few different times in my life. I wrote about some of them in my book. But there were things that were hard to overcome. And then there was that underlying stress that people who are really busy right now, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't even know how long, Kristin, but I would go probably, I would have one night, 6 hours sleep, maybe another one, maybe 5. Then I'd have one good night. I'm exhausted. I would get 7 hours. Then I would remember going once a week with 2 or 3 hours. And it did seem that was my primary issue. Like if I slept well, I was in a good mood.
Yeah.
If I didn't sleep well, it impacted everything else. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know, I'm just curious, the dread to go into it, is it because in a sense you're reliving what you've made it out from? Or is it worrying about what people think once you're vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. No, I'm gonna discuss something in this episode that I have not discussed with maybe just a few people. I mean, the family knows it, but I'm going to discuss something in this episode that was pretty difficult. I've discussed the other major things: my daughter's car accident, the death of my cousin. I was with him. That's in my book.
Yeah.
It was too painful for me to edit, but it's in there. I had someone else edit it. But I'm going to bring up another tragedy that had an impact. And then, I do think, Kristin, you and I were on an episode early on, and I remember, if you don't remember this, but I got defensive. You said, you mentioned that you went through this depression or something after retirement. And I corrected you and said, well, I wasn't really depressed. I just couldn't sleep. Well, even since then, I've done a lot of reading. That's a sign of depression right there.
Right.
And I did not I even had someone tell me, because I told them, I said, God, I've been up to 2 or 3 in the morning watching Netflix. And I still felt like the government was watching me. They probably are, but it was so weird that I couldn't sleep. And then I would not admit it couldn't be depression. I'm just, I'm freaked out because I'm not working. It's not that, but in my 8-hour leadership course, Kristin, I can go back and watch that. Now, I'm proud of it. I want people to get it, but I'm saying I can look at myself and know that I hadn't slept very much that day. And it's really sad, but that was 2 years ago when I did that. And some of the podcasts, which I'm not that rested today, but I'm saying I look better than I did 2 years ago because that's when I was going through it, when I was doing that 8-hour course.
Really wild that you bring that up, because once in a while, on like your computer or on your TV, you can have pictures that rotate through however many years of photos you have. And once in a while, a picture will pop up of me when my daughter was going through her seizures and right before her brain surgery. And I look at myself and I think, oh, that's 2019. We were going through that. And I was dealing with all of this stress, right? And so when I look at that picture, that's all I see is I'm almost reliving. And so I completely know where you're coming from with that. And, most everyone has ups and downs in life, but instead of coming up with a plan to overcome, we simply succumb to the hardships and the challenges and live in a rut. And this not only affects and impacts our well-being, it affects everything we do. And it can even hurt the people closest to you. I'm sure we can both look back at those times and think of, maybe we are exhausted and we lash out at somebody or, speak in a tone that wasn't pleasant, right? There's just all sorts of ways it impacts people around you.
Oh, I used to have a saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Mm.
Eventually, if you're stressed, it's going to come out in a negative way. You're
Yeah.
tired, you're irritable. I've talked a lot about the brain. I won't go into it very much, but even the prefrontal cortex, where you make decisions, if you're tired or you've got sad emotions or emotional baggage in the amygdala, it comes out. You can't even think straight. So
Yeah.
you're going to be irritable. You're going to make poor decisions.
Right.
It's almost like drinking alcohol,
Yeah.
when you get inebriated. It's similar to that. You just don't make good decisions. So
Right.
now, in addition to that, I don't want to upset our listeners here, but I do have to say this, Kristin, in my lifetime, it's the most chaotic that I've ever seen it.
Mm.
And I've told you, Kristin, this before. I think I said it on the podcast. I know I've told you, there are some times that I post and walk away from social media.
Right. It's called post and ghost.
Post and ghost.
Yeah.
You have
I
like
to.
that. And I'm sure other people feel the same way. And I'm on police networks and stuff, so I probably see more of the negative. I know you do, but some people, apparently they look at kittens all day or something. I need to get on those, I guess.
Yeah.
But if, when I'm watching social media, the news, you're seeing crime, you're seeing protests, you're seeing anger, you're seeing hatred, more division than I've seen. I'm sure it was the same way during the Vietnam type stuff, but I don't remember that. So, and then you've got homelessness. And then I've said before, I said last week, I have personal knowledge of sex trafficking and fentanyl coming across the border, which has increased. Mm-hmm. And I'll just go ahead and say, I mentioned that I was going to discuss something. I had a nephew by marriage, the cutest, he was just the cutest little kid. We used to laugh that he looked like the little guy on Christmas Story. You remember that guy, the blonde hair? He had blonde hair, he had blue eyes.
My goodness.
He looked so much like him when he was a kid. So anyway, he grows up not in the best environment, and he began to work on this road crew. And I don't know if it's like oil riggers, gas, it was natural gas or something like that. But he was very dedicated. He always showed up, and they would stay in hotels, and then the crew would all get together in the morning, breakfast or whatever, and then go out on the cruise. So this particular day he doesn't show up, and he just didn't miss work. So they're trying to figure out what's going on. So during breaks, I don't remember all the details, but they're calling his hotel room, trying to figure out where he is or his cell phone, and never turned up. So finally, when they got back, they got the hotel staff, and they went in, and he was dead, and he had purchased marijuana, and it was laced with fentanyl. And the guys on the crew said they know that he did not know that was laced with fentanyl, or at minimum, he had no idea that this was anything deadly, a deadly dose, but they think he didn't even know.
Wow.
And so he passed. So, I didn't say this last week, but I mentioned about going on your show. That's how we met. And I didn't discuss it then, if you remember, Kristin, and it was pretty fresh, but I wasn't comfortable discussing it.
Right.
But when some people began to attack me on LinkedIn, I really was tempted to say, why don't you call this kid's mother and tell her how you feel about this? But I didn't.
Right.
But her life he was her everything. Her life's completely destroyed. And I mean, his dad as well, they were divorced, but it was just so emotionally taxing on everyone. But you also go through that flood of emotions. I was really pissed off. And when I see people minimizing what's happened at the border, I take that personally, Kristin.
Right. Naturally. And, I've shared that I have a sister who she's been sober, I believe, 7 years now. She's 5 years younger than me, my only sibling. And she was a drug addict for 10 years. And it's, started with marijuana and went on. And, when she was finally arrested, that's the only reason she sobered up is they threw the book at her and she got a 3-year prison sentence. And she was injecting black tar heroin and meth. And she said just recently, seeing what's happening with fentanyl, and she said if I was doing drugs today, just understanding, to your point, you don't know how much is in something, and such a small dose is deadly. She said, "Oh, I'd be dead today if I was still living the lifestyle I was now that fentanyl's in the mix." And so it is a very serious thing, and we know primarily where it's coming from, and apparently that offends some, but it's real, and we have to be understanding of that and be willing to take it head on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And thank you for sharing that, because I know it's really tough to dive into things that are so personal. But, for the sake of others, and that's why we do this, is to be able to work through things that we've gone through in life. We hope to help other people deal with what life throws at them. And, pivoting a little bit here, studies show that wellness has become just another program at work. A lot of businesses, companies, they have wellness programs. Most people have probably heard of them. And think about remote work. That's another element, right? So you add in that remote work and this wellness program, it's gotten even worse. And so some facts, I see it almost like companies are checking boxes. I feel like there's good intentions generally, right? Most leaders genuinely care about their staff. Most companies want their employees to be healthy and happy. Happy cows produce happy milk, right? I don't know, whatever that saying is, but it's true. You want to keep people happy and they're going to produce better. So that, I would say, the sentiment is there. Most major agencies or organizations have some type of wellness focus or program. There are many creative programs. We've probably all heard of chair yoga, or when companies get together and they do like a group 5K run or a weight loss challenge. I keep flashing back to The Office when they're all standing on that giant scale and
Kristin,
oh my goodness.
I have to interrupt.
Please.
I've made fun of chair yoga, and I was speaking in this event and they wanted to show me, that they're doing wellness. So
yeah.
I went to this chair yoga and I really did. I thought it was funny, and I started doing it. Next thing you know, like my arms are shaking. So I was thinking, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to do the downward dog, but I was, it was harder than I thought.
Wait, so I've never done chair yoga. I'm assuming you said your arms were shaking. So I'm assuming you're sitting in the chair, or they don't have you like lift it and stuff, right?
No, you're not lifting it, but you sit in the chair some, but you stretch, you get in all these positions.
Okay.
Stand behind the chair, in front of the chair. We did. And some of it was a little more tasking than I thought it was.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is with yoga, and why I appreciate it is because you're doing something for an elongated period of time.
Yeah.
And so it will tire your muscles. And you'll feel, soreness in areas you didn't even know existed when you do yoga. I need to get back to it, actually. But we all know those weight loss challenges. Gosh, I can't imagine today. I mean, last week we went over being canceled. I can't imagine a weight loss challenge today. We'll have to, I don't know if that's still happening. If it is, probably not at major corporations, but, or bookending, start the day strong and strong. I know police departments locally, they do a wellness period. And it's usually either in the beginning of the shift or at the end of the shift. And a lot of them have their gyms, like the police departments have a gym there that they can work out in. I can't imagine wanting to get super sweaty before shift, but anyhow, it's there, and it's for them to use however they need. And I think that's great, especially for a job like law enforcement. But there's also, for more office type, there's the in-house training or wellness committees, wellness conferences, tech tools to measure personal wellness. Oh my gosh, that's a whole thing. The smartwatch, and there's a million other little gadgets that you can do. But there's so much out there, and I do think that the sentiment is positive. It just needs some honing.
Yeah, and I want to say that the Fitbit and things like that. I did see people counting steps. So there's some progress. The problem is, like you said, the corporate wellness programs have become stale. When people are already busy, it's just another program. And like I said, it's usually the well people that attend.
Right.
And so basically, we need to ask ourselves, is it time to measure outcomes, participation rate, impact? All of these things need to be measured. And when you're just checking a box, like you said, Kristin, then they're not worried about it. Here, we've got this wellness program. We're doing a 5K in 3 months or whatever they do. But we need to look at outcomes. And I will tell you that I was in 2 different places, by the way, that did chair yoga. And one of them, another group, was telling me about it. And they had, I don't know, there was a lot of people in the office, and 12 people showed up. So if you think of it, it sounds good on paper. We have chair yoga every week. But when you've got 90 people and 12 people show up, that's a problem.
Right.
That's not a successful program. So that's why no matter what you're doing, you got to measure outcomes. And when I say variables, what I mean is you have Wellness Wednesday and half the staff works from home on Wednesdays. You see what I'm saying? If you're not looking for outcomes, or is there some way to measure progress? Whether that's, objective, like you said, some places used to do the weight loss, that's objective, but subjective is, are you feeling better? Are you doing better?
Right.
Things like that. So I definitely believe that we've missed something.
Oh, I agree. And we're going to obviously go into some more detail here, but when I was leading teams, what they wanted, excuse me, over an hour of wellness, they wanted to get off an hour early, right? Sometimes someone would opt for coming in an hour late. That's fine. But I think it's important that we ask them, how can we help you with your wellness? And maybe it is getting off an hour early so they can go to the gym or run some errands so that's not weighing on them. Whatever you got to do. Wellness comes in all forms. But I have some shocking stats here. Prepare to be shocked or not. But according to Biz Journals, now this is a 2017 Global Benefits Attitudes Survey, and so we'll put this in the show notes, but it found that only 1/3 of employees in 22 countries, big survey here, thought that their employers' wellness programs helped them live healthier lives, while 60% were actively dissatisfied with the programs. That's a big number there. So focusing on the U.S. alone, in the United States, satisfaction with employer well-being programs dropped from 41% in 2011 to 32% in 2017. And I'm sure it's even lower today. I can only fathom that it's quite low. I know you're going to share a little bit from the Harvard Business Journal here.
Yeah, this is a Gartner's 2021. It was a benchmarking survey, revealed that although 87% of employees have access to well-being offerings, only 23% of employees use them, which is exactly what I just said. And this pattern applies to physical and financial well-being programs as well. Gartner's 2020 Wellbeing Benchmark Survey found that almost all organizations, 96%, offered mental well-being programs. Wellbeing Employee Survey revealed that less than half of the employees, 42%, thought that their organizations offered them. In other words, they didn't even know they were being offered. So somewhere we've got a communication problem.
No, that's really interesting. It's, I was going to bring this up. I know that locally, one of the police departments, they have mandatory wellness. So it doesn't mean you have to go. They're not going to strap you to a treadmill, right? But you have an hour either before your shift or after your shift, mandatory, 100%. And you can use that to catch up on your emails, your personal. You can use it to work out. You can use it to stretch. I mean, it's mandatory wellness, and it's basically an hour for you to do what you got to do, but it has to be on site. What are your thoughts on that?
I look at the job. It's a fitness job. Like you have to retire at age 57. I absolutely agree with that. If I ever run for sheriff, they better look out. There's going to be fitness programs put in place. I watch these videos of cops getting thrown around. They don't take jujitsu. They're overweight. All of that stuff needs to end. The reality is it's a physical fit type job. And that's, when you sign up, that's what you got to do.
Right.
Now, Kristin, changing just a little bit, when I was doing research on this, I found this to be very interesting. There's negative, like wellness was cool for a while. And then there's been these negative attitudes toward wellness programs. As a matter of fact, it's caused a divide in some offices because you got your gung-ho people, they want to run and do a 5K or they want to measure fat. And then you got the other people making fun of them and saying, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And it's created a divide.
Yeah.
Some people believe it's just another program. They're already busy. And this one I loved, and then I'll get you to do some of these. Some people believe that wellness programs were just a way to get in good with the boss. Like, if you show up if you're going to do the 5K, you're doing chair yoga, you're doing all these things, it looks good to the boss, especially if the boss is participating.
Right. That's the big key there.
You can see where that, that could be the case.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad idea. I think that like in the corporate world, when you have an executive, especially someone that you look up to, someone that you eventually want to work for or with, when they say you are aware that they're going to be doing chair yoga, it would be smart of you to go sign up and partake and get that FaceTime with them. Right. And so I don't know if it's, to earn favor with the boss. I mean, hey, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. We talk about brown nosers, but there's being just smart about, and we've done a whole episode on, you need to be seen to get promoted. We did a whole episode on being promoted, right?
Managing up.
And the whole thing is like, you need to be visible. If you're not visible, they're not even going to know you exist. So it just depends. It depends on who's taking part in these wellness programs. And gosh, even if you're not into yoga, but the person that you want to work with is going to be there, you better sign yourself up. Limber up. I think that
was free,
smart.
folks. That was free.
Exactly. What's interesting? We were talking about participation earlier. The bank I used to work for, they did really cool stuff, and it was more of a local regional bank. And they actually brought in, this is the perfect example of where you do all these great things, but then you have a very small percentage who participated. They brought in, oh my goodness, llamas, like therapy llamas. And they had them downtown Portland in their like fancy building. And they have all these cute, therapy llamas with the little flowers in their hair. And they had advertised it. And then I saw pictures later of the event. I'm thinking like a dozen people went max. And it's so sad because like everything that went into it, there's a cost involved, and they tried, but it's difficult, especially when you have to make room for the travel, right? Like maybe you have an employee who wants to go to something. You need to make sure you support them in the schedule and actually carve out room for them to actually travel to the event, the wellness event. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. I had some employees, I wanted to get alpaca so they'd spit on them.
Oh my, you know what? An alpaca might've been there. I don't know, but they are spitters, aren't they? Oh my goodness. Okay.
You want to take a couple?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So like you said, they weren't even aware that the program was offered. That happens all the time. So going from the boss one, I've already given my opinion on that one. It also can be, it doesn't align with their schedule. I just briefly touched on that. That's something that can come into play, or it doesn't appeal to them, right? You might have somebody that is wanting to focus more on mental health, and instead this is physical, right? They're already into health and fitness. They have their routine. They leave work. They go right to the gym. They're doing their CrossFit, right? They already have their jam. And they're not gonna, go in a different direction.
And Kristin, just to mention that group, I have found that group also because they think it's a joke, like they're running marathons and you're trying to get everybody in shape to run a mile. So that becomes a divide as well. Yeah. And you mentioned this, but they used to measure fat. And by the way, it was done voluntarily, but people participated. And but then there's other people said that infringes upon my privacy because you're getting in good with the boss. I'm not going to go get my fat measured. Or
who's doing the measuring? That's my question.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, who's going to be? I will volunteer to pinch your fat roll with this machine.
They got those devices.
Yeah.
They got those devices.
Goodness gracious.
And then some people, the wellness program, because they miss a day or they never start, whatever, they just feel worse. It just makes them feel worse. It makes them feel guilty. I remember running when I was at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We'd be running. They had these little smoke areas, and we're running, and these people are smoking. And I remember they had a cigarette, and they'd just watch us go by. Sometimes we'd wave. What else do you do?
That's pretty.
Talk about
you
a
wonder if it's
dichotomy
intentional. There. Yeah, seriously. Oh my goodness. Well, there's also, they could be too burned out to participate, right? We did a whole episode on burnout and bore-out syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And that's something to touch on too, but you can be burned out and everything in addition to just going to work and doing your home life stresses you out, right? And you just don't have the energy to put into it, or it's not personalized enough. That's another thing that these companies are running into.
And Kristin, because you said that, I think that brings us to really the point that we want to make. Wellness is a program. Well-being, we are human beings. We're being, it applies, it's more personal.
Right.
So when I do this training, by the way, most of what we're covering here, and one of the things I encourage them to do, in addition to measure their outcomes and success rates, participation rates, is to get them to move from wellness to well-being. Personalize this. Have accountability partners. Make sure that staff have the supervisor meet with each individual, because you just mentioned up there that it's not personal enough. So I don't like to run, but I might like to do something. I might like to walk. Yeah. So you have a supervisor or you have a wellness coordinator that meets with each individual to say, is there some way that I could help you be more well, apply well-being strategies with that individual. And that has gotten some success. Or you have a well-being partner. I call it accountability. You don't really want to use that word because it's more of a negative connotation. Yeah, but to say a well-being partner is better. And I've talked before, we're not going to go into it here, but in my trainings, I use that P2P, where if somebody is really, they seem off, that you ask for permission to pry. May I ask what's going on? And that seems to help people when they consider their well-being versus wellness. And I give people a little charge. I spoke in Raleigh, North Carolina, not long ago, and then in Michigan, Grand Rapids, and I leave them with a charge about micro-stressors. And you retire early in law enforcement. What do you want for the rest of your life? Do you want to be on 10 medications? Do you want to deal with it now? Do you want to be well now? And sometimes there needs to be like a wake-up call. Yeah. What's some other things people can do?
Well,
Kristin?
I want to just add on to you mentioned this well-being partner, and my mom and I currently are doing the keto diet. We like to reference it more of a lifestyle change, right? But it's funny because we've both been pretty much on par with each other, checking in, making sure each other's not, it's been like 6 weeks now, no one's cheating. And my mom goes on a 2-week vacation and she's like, well, I did pretty well. And so then she gets back and I'm on her and I'm like, look, I need you. Basically, I was being this well-being partner, even though she got a little irritated with me. I got her back on track, because it's like, when you have that person holding you accountable, I know we're getting away from the accountability buzzword there, but when they have your well-being in their best interest and they're checking in with you, it's just human nature. When somebody is there and they know what your goals are and they're going to help you meet them, you're going to just naturally make decisions when you're on your own that are better and that are going to help you hit your goal. And so even though my mom got irritated with me, I actually don't care, because I helped get her back on track. And I don't know if she would have if I wouldn't have just been pretty straightforward about it.
No, it does take that. And that's why you have a partner. You get someone you trust. That's the other thing, is you can't it's usually can't be the supervisor, or you got to get
Yeah.
people who generally like each other.
Right.
And by the way, you're never going to have 100% on this. So if you do have a wellness coordinator or a manager that's meeting with people, if people don't want to do it, you don't force them to do it. Now,
Right.
I know
Can
I
you
sound
imagine, Ron? You're like, you didn't meet your weight loss goal in the corporate America, or even,
and that's what I'm
goodness.
talking about is corporate America. Again,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
stand by my police, military. They need to have standards. But yes,
Yeah.
um,
Oh my gosh. Ron busts out the fat percentage thing. All right.
yeah,
During the
another story came to my
one-on-ones.
mind, but I'm not going there. I'm moving on.
All right.
So if you happen to be a manager, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these because we know everyone listening to us is not managers. But if you do have the power to influence, the power to make decisions, or maybe it's a recommendation you can make to your manager. But what needs to happen is there needs to be a survey the staff, and also keep in mind, if you've got different age groups, you need to keep that in mind as well. If you've got someone working that's 65, they're probably not going to do the same wellness as the 20 something. So that's where that personalized approach, works in. And we've already said, make it personal to each individual, but make sure wellness programs or well-being programs are announced. Make sure everyone knows, because we saw that earlier statistic that over half the people didn't even know they had wellness programs.
Yeah, seriously.
So, yeah, that's not good. And then, Kristin, you said this, but if you can be flexible, like if you can allow people to leave early. Now, you can't call the gym and see if they're on a treadmill. But if you let people leave early, a lot of times that still provides a psychological well-being.
Right.
And there's things like that. Now, I did hear a story about, they approved 3 times per week. This was a law enforcement agency that you could go on your own time and you could do 3 hours. So what happened was a bunch of guys started leaving early and playing golf. And at that time, that was looked at really negatively. But later in life, I thought, what the heck? Let them play golf if that's, but at that time they got in trouble over that.
Oh, wow.
So
we have to think outside the box. And I think that's a perfect example of wellness. I mean, that's just, you're walking, you have to carry your clubs. And I mean, and you're getting that tribe time, right? That we're just, as humans, we need that community. So, hey, I think we're looking at things a lot different as a nation, which is good. And to your point, I don't know if that'd be frowned on today.
Yeah. Now, this is a question. Chris and I talked about this before we signed on. I asked this in trainings. As a matter of fact, I was with, I don't remember, like 75, 80 executives, higher up executives. And I posed this question, and it created more discussion than anything else we did. Here it is. And ask yourself this if you're listening. When you take vacation, do you take vacation? And the conversations were people were working on reports, they were checking emails, they were calling. So I was riding with this guy, Mike Sheffield. I was speaking in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he picked me up at the airport, and we're just talking. And he said to me that he goes to the end of the earth to work his schedule so that he could take 2 straight weeks off. And here's the point, and think about this. And if I've done this before, folks, forgive me, but this is important. Just take a typical family vacation. Let's say you got a couple kids. You're going to do all this prep, planning, packing, all this stuff. Then if you fly, then you got to be more creative with packing. But a lot of families drive. You drive 7 hours to a beach somewhere. By the time you get there, you're completely exhausted. So the first day, you gotta make yourself do it, but you go do things for the kids, but you're worn out. And then the second day, you're starting to rest up. You start to get your groove a little bit. Third, maybe the pressure starting, it's Tuesday or Wednesday, and you're starting to feel okay. But then by Thursday, you start thinking we're driving back on Sunday or even Monday, and you start to dread it. And he went through that pattern. I thought, oh my God, that's me. I used to take reports with me, and then I would start dreading that long drive back. So what he talked about, he said the first time he did it, he worked out, he had a buddy system. He got somebody to help him. He said, I'll help you. He took 2 weeks, and he said it was about Thursday or Friday he started to decompress, and he didn't have to worry about going back Sunday or Monday. And he said, no matter what, for the past 6 or 7 years, he had started doing a 2-week vacation. He said it changed his life. He came back refreshed. He came back ready to work. So when I talked that through with the executives, they were talking about themselves at first, but then we started saying, what can you do for a buddy system for teams to help someone take a vacation and not work on vacation?
Right.
And like I said, this discussion, I had to finally stop it and keep talking, but ask yourself that question. When you take a vacation, do you take a vacation?
Yeah.
It's very important.
That's
Go
profound.
ahead, Kristin.
No, I think it's wonderful that you're even talking about that. I know briefly I've shared that we used to cut off email access when someone would be on vacation for a week or more. And that was so that they didn't work while they were on vacation, but it was a standard practice across the bank.
Is awesome. I remember you saying that. I didn't say anything then, but I remember thinking, oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
And next, we need to consider the virtual hybrid work factor. In other words, if you're having chair yoga, that's not going to work unless you bring people on virtually. So be careful with that. Make sure you're reaching out to people virtually. Here's a big one for me, and this is in my leadership training. Coach middle managers especially, they have more day-to-day contact. Have them or encourage them to be aware of circumstances. In other words, if someone just had twins or someone's had a death in the family, their pet died, whatever it is, a good manager knows that. And you work on someone's well-being around that. It's not all about fitness. A lot of it's about just encouragement and, a pat on the back sometimes and all that. Because we've talked a lot about exercise, but a lot of it's mental encouragement that people need. And I already said this, but lead by example. The one thing my staff knew is I worked out. And I used to have this joke when I'd walk out of my office. There was just a couple of people upstairs or right next to it, but I would say, I'm going to hone the vessel. And it was a good laugh.
Yeah.
And then what happened is people started wellness programs. They were going well, but then they forgot to reevaluate and it just dropped off. So you got to reevaluate at least semi-annually.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Kristin, I do a cool thing when I teach this, but I have somebody with boxing gloves. You might have seen pictures of it.
Yeah, I have. I love it.
I have them punch my hand over and over and over. And I say, that doesn't hurt right now, but if that person did it all night, and I'm talking about micro-stressors, that by the next morning I'd be bruised.
Right.
So I talk about ways you deal with things. And then I do I block it. I do a little martial arts thing. And it's called parrying. It's when you move something to the side or redirect.
Yeah.
So I do that. But what we need to do, we need to think about, I've said this before, I used to get stressed out by traffic. So I would turn on something I really liked on the radio, take some breaths, or get off the exit at a coffee shop if I could.
Yeah. So
we need to really work on our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And Kristin, since we've already covered a little bit about burnout, let's go into, I want to touch on just quickly a stressed brain.
Yeah.
And I've talked a lot about the amygdala storing our emotions. It works with the hippocampus, but the prefrontal cortex makes those intricate decisions. And when you get tired, when you get stressed, when you're emotionally drained, it affects your decision-making process. And you're going to make more mistakes at work. You're going to be irritable, all those things that we've talked a little bit about. But we've got a chart, and of course, you can't see it, but it shows it's red, and it shows thoughts going everywhere in one chart. But then it shows an unstressed brain. That was the stressed brain where thoughts are going everywhere. An unstressed brain shows thoughts really being a straight line. You're making good decisions. So think about that. That comes through rest and eating and fitness and thinking good thoughts, all those things. And Kristin, why don't you talk a little bit more about redirecting stress? Give us a formula.
Yeah. So, and I think it's important. One, you mentioned some things that trigger you, like the traffic, right? And that triggers a lot of people. So I think knowing that is incredibly important. And then understanding it's something you're going to face every day if you're commuting every day, right? So instead of it getting you worked up every day, how are you going to redirect? So that is starting with recognizing the situation. You're recognizing that this is a stressor for you and it makes you irritable. Ways to combat that: regular grounded breathing. I've talked about Wim Hof before. That's what I've practiced and continue to practice, not every day, but at least weekly. And it helps me a lot physically and mentally. Self-talk. We've talked about you're literally, your brain is listening to everything that comes out of your mouth, right? And so that positive self-talk, words of affirmation, that actually does something. If you're embarrassed to do it in front of people, do it while you're driving. Do it while you're getting
Yeah.
ready in the bathroom by yourself or whenever. But that is something, there's science behind it, and it actually will help you redirect that stress you're under. Visualizing alternate outcomes. And this is something that I learned as a competitive gymnast. I had a Bulgarian coach. He was a medal winner in the Olympics. And we were taught early on to visualize the outcome. And what's so cool about that today is there are things that stress me out. I don't love driving from task to task or sport to this meeting. I don't enjoy that. But when you know you have something ahead of you and you visualize the outcome, I like to visualize, all right, I'm going to drive to golf, and then we're going to go to tennis, and then I'm going to come home and cook, and everyone's going to be able to decompress, right? Like I'm visualizing this outcome, and it helps me. It's almost like that baby step mentality.
Kristin, can I jump in on that
Yeah,
quickly?
please.
I've helped a lot of people with public speaking because I was afraid to do that early in my life. But what happens is, I've said this before, the brain is designed to protect us and give us comfort. That's the two things. So the brain will protect you and give you visions that you're going to pass out, you're going to hyperventilate, all these things when you speak in public. So part of that mindfulness training that we've talked about, and we've talked about various studies, like you said, it's scientific, but you visualize yourself giving a great speech. You visualize the audience clapping. I used to hear people say visualize they're in their underwear. I don't use that one, but I can see where that might help lower the stress a little bit. But you really do. Your brain will give you the worst outcome many times, and you train the brain to visualize a great outcome. And that helps. Go ahead.
Exactly. I just thought of the underwear thing. I would have this look of repulsion on my face. So that one just never made sense to me.
You couldn't let that go, could you, Kristin?
No. I mean, then it made me think about my last public speaking engagement, and then just everyone in front of me. I was, oh, yeah, it's not something I want to see. But yes, it's all about visualizing that outcome. And I love that about the public speaking. Just today, I met with somebody, and we're working on a project at church, and we're doing a prom dress drive. And it's funny, the gal that's running it is afraid of public speaking. And so when the church was like, all right, we want you to come up and talk about it for 5 minutes so that folks know when to bring the prom dresses, all, the objective, why you're doing it, etc. She's like, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. So she delegated it to somebody who was comfortable public speaking, but they didn't know what they were talking about. So they missed the whole message. And now people don't know, wait, why are we bringing these prom dresses to church? So anyhow, it just shows that one, that is a very, very common fear for people. But two, there are ways around it, and there are things that can help with it, like visualizing. So something else, remind yourself of past victories especially when you get overwhelmed, ways that you've made it through that stress or those stressors, and just times that you've patted yourself on the back, or maybe you should have if you didn't.
Yeah.
And then something else, do something good for somebody. And, that one is timeless. Could be a neighbor, could be someone in your community. It doesn't matter. It could be a stranger. Do something good, and that will help you be balanced.
Absolutely. And Kristin, I'm going to give kind of a final speech that I give when I do this training. These micro-stressors, they creep up on us. And you said it, you got to recognize that I may not be, over the top, but I'm starting to feel this little bit of panic, this little bit of stress.
Yeah.
And that's where those breathing and these things, because cortisol gets released. And over a period of time, heart conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, all these things begin to happen because we didn't recognize the situation. We didn't deal with it. So you need to fast forward the next 5 years. How do you want your health to look? And you have a lot of control over that by what you put in your body, the fitness, the maybe getting a well-being partner. But a big one is your thoughts, your words, and your actions. I always put people on a negativity diet. It sounds funny,
Love it.
but I've had great testimonies from that. 30 days, I challenge you to go on a negativity diet and begin to think good thoughts. And Kristin, when I started visualizing, like rain makes me sleep better than anything. So I started playing rain on a machine.
Yeah.
And I just picture that it's it's a dark evening, it's raining, I'm cozy, I'm comfortable.
Right.
And I just picture that it's really raining. That's the story that plays out in my mind, and it makes me relaxed, and I go to sleep. And I was talking to someone about that the other day, and they go, I've been doing that for years. I was like, why don't you tell me?
Yeah, I could see, I literally have, just living in the Pacific Northwest, it's literally raining almost every night. But no, the same thing. I have a little noisemaker machine, and I have it set on rain, and there's something about being cozy inside when it's nasty out there, and it's just relaxing and comforting. And I think just knowing those things about yourself helps you.
That's right. Well, this is a lot of information, and I hope you've stayed with us. If you had, we're really grateful. And we not only want you to be great leaders, we want you to be well. We want you to be healthy so you can lead, so you can be there for people who need you. And we want you to live a fulfilled, good life.
Right.
Don't be stagnant. Don't be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Be glad that you're well and you're pursuing that well-being.
Yeah, exactly. And one last thing. Here's a test for longevity. If you can get up off the ground without needing your hands, you're in a good position. Make that your goal. If you can't currently get off the ground without having to push off with your hands. A lot of health experts say that goal to longevity is not losing that flexibility and those small movements.
That's great. And God, we can go on and on, but the hip flexors are the first thing to go. That's why elderly people have to pick their legs up and set them in a car. That's why it's so important to bring those knees up regularly. Yep. Oh gosh, we could go on and on.
I know we could. Should do a whole one on fitness.
Everybody be well and be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.